Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to another 2023 Project Orchids video. And in fact, we're now into the set of final videos for the project, for the year. So we're doing orchid number 1 today, which is Dendrobium lindleyi. And the final video in the set will include parts, or in some cases all, of the clips done throughout the year. So we're going to be starting with the clip from February, probably in its entirety, because I did put out an awful lot of information about the plant in question in that particular video, as it was the first one. And then there may be edited clips. I may re-record the soundtrack as we progress. So we've got 4 videos to go, pre-recorded obviously as we went through the year, which some or all will come forward. I will now record video number 5, which will be as the plant is at the end of the project basically. So this is the final part, and I hope you enjoy them. They're obviously a longer video than some of the ones during the year, because they do incorporate, you know, the other 4 plus the 5th one, which I'm about to do now. So let's get going and see how this plant fared through the year. Okay, so orchid number 1 is Dendrobium lindleyi, also known as aggregatum. This is in the section Densiflora. You can look up the orchids in an individual section. Dendrobiums are sort of unique in the way that they're categorized, because the dendrobiums are divided up already into sections, and as such hardly ever get messed about with as far as naming is concerned. Although they do change sections sometimes, that doesn't mean they have to have their name changed. And it's very rarely something that's called a dendrobium suddenly becomes called something else. So they're pretty static in the naming standards. I like this. Right, Dendrobium lindleyi. If you go to the... once upon a time, the story says there was a great big lump of earth, and all the countries and everything were just one big lump, and they split up, obviously over a week or two. And the cattleyas went left and the dendrobiums went right. So the dendrobiums tend to be found from sort of parts of India across to China and south down through the islands and those parts of the world and on into Australia as a genus. This one is found in northeast India across to China and then down through Myanmar, and the countries down through there, right down to sort of Cambodia, so Thailand, Laos, all those countries there. And it's found at various elevations, so it would be classed as a cool to warm grower. In other words, the temperature is not the most important thing for this orchid. It'll put up with warmth and it'll put up with cooler temperatures. It probably grows best averaging the two, so intermediate temperatures would probably be okay, but, and there's a big but for this one, it is a seasonal dendrobium, and that seasonal care is important, or you are unlikely to get your blooms. That will be your down. You might get a lovely big healthy plant with lovely green leaves and everything, but no flowers. So the care at this time of year is very important. So we'll go over winter care, because that's where we are now. We're at the beginning of February. It's still winter time. This plant is currently resting. So what does that mean? That means it gets little or no food, and it gets watered very infrequently. That does mean that the canes look a little bit shriveled as you go through winter, but that's important. But alongside that is temperature and light, and this is where this dendrobium can be a bit finicky. It needs bright light in the winter, yeah, and it needs to be cooler than it was in the growing season. And this is where you can fool this type of orchid, is if you keep it shadier in its growing season and then keep it as bright as you can in the winter, the difference between the two is more extreme and you'll get more blooms. You'll get a better bloom. You'll get a blooming for a start. Now, as far as the temperatures are concerned, again, it needs to be cooler in the winter than it was in the growing season. How cool remains to be seen. You could experiment with it, but I suspect if you keep it too warm in the winter time, you will lose your blooming, or you won't get as many or as good a blooming. So that's the care it's currently under. Little or no food and very infrequent watering. And it will stay like that until the plant tells me to do something different. That will be signs of spikes, probably first, followed by some new growths. This plant will get taken off its mount and remounted during this season, but not now. Doing it when it's dormant might sound a good thing to do, but it'll struggle to get going because of the root disturbance. So it's better to do it when it's actively growing and it's got new roots coming. So that's that. They bloom in late winter, early spring, and sometimes later than that. That does vary, and again, that's down to light and temperature. The trigger for this to come into bloom and new growths up either at the same time or not long after is longer days and an increase in daytime temperatures, which I will artificially, well, not the light, I'll get the light anyway, but I will artificially increase my daytime temperatures, probably at the end of this month into the beginning of March. And we'll see if we can trigger this into growth early this year. So that's that. As far as the shape is concerned, you've got canes that are basically very narrow at the base, wider in the middle, and come to an apex with a single really leathery, strong leaf. They're not a large plant, they're classed as small to medium, but they can clump up and form quite a large mass of canes. I would say that cane round the back is probably about as big as they get, and that's about, in old money, about 3 inches, 3.5 inches long. Some are smaller. These are old seed. This started out as a seedling, so this has been grown on. These are the little seedling pseudobulbs. Serve no purpose and can be taken off with a plant of this age. So there we go. That's what this one looks like, where it comes from, and the care it's getting at the moment. Okay, this is the second video in the series. This was filmed in the first week of April, and this is an edited, much shortened clip than the original video, simply because there's nothing happening with the plant at this particular time of year. Now, this plant should have come out of its resting period in April, and it's done nothing. So there are no signs of new growths, no signs of activity whatsoever, and no spikes. Curses. So basically this plant is still resting, and it shouldn't be. It's difficult to know what else I can do. I've sort of raised the temperatures, the day lengths are getting longer, but the plant is still resting, and I think it's just weak. So we're going to have to try and do something about that during this growing season. The plant is not happy, otherwise it would have come back into growth by now. We'll see what we can do. Okay, Dendrobium lindleyi. Now, mine is not a good example, and mine is not doing what a lindleyi should be doing at this time of year. So first of all, I'm going to go over where this plant ought to be if it's growing well. So it should have already bloomed. Yeah, it should have already done that. Blooms late spring, early summer. Some may still be in bloom. Some may have finished quite a while ago. But either way, you know, coming into early summer, well, we're heading for midsummer on mine, we should have new growths pushing on, and I've got none. So in the normal world, these plants should now be in active growth and should be kept moist and fed on a regular basis to make sure you get nice swollen canes with good sized leaves. And if you're really lucky, you might even get a cane with 2 leaves. Now this has been stripped off its mount, in my case. The roots were not very good, and it's been put in a pot with some moss near the surface to keep it moist. The idea being, hopefully with the extra moisture, it will come back into growth. It could also be the end of the plant. That could be an alternative. But at the moment it's doing nothing. Now bearing in mind it hasn't been long put in this setup. So I'm waiting for a response, and that's all I can do at the moment, is just wait for a response. I can't help it in any way really. It doesn't need bright light this time of year. Growing season, you just need medium to good light. You don't need the sort of bright light you need for its winter rest. You can forget that for the growing season. Yeah. Whatever type of forest these are found in, whether they're fully deciduous or semi-deciduous or tropical forests, during the growing season they would have leaf cover above them, so they don't grow in bright light. So there we go. You know, if yours is in active growth, keep it moist, feed and water well, as I always say, and, you know, get those canes as large as you can for the growing season. And that's all you can do. All I can do is patiently wait to see if it comes back into growth. And if it comes back into growth, I will have to adjust my seasonal care for my plant, not for everybody else's, because I will have to try and keep it growing as long as possible and stop it from resting until those growths have finished and got up to a reasonable size. Okay, so this is my Dendrobium lindleyi, and it's not a good version of this plant. It was once. It was bought as a young plant, grown on, came into bloom sooner than I expected, and this current year it didn't bloom at all. I had no blooms. Next to no new growths last year, so it was going downhill quite badly. So somewhere in between video number 2 and video number 3, it was taken off of its mount and potted to see if it would do any better, having a bit more moisture around the roots and just give it a chance to do something different. So what's happened is we have now got some new growth. When it was repotted, the roots were appalling, so it's living off next to no roots at the moment, but hopefully the new growths that I've got going will mature into full-size bulbs, even though they haven't got as much of the season left as they should have, because they're only just starting in August, when they should have started in April really. So we'll see what we can do. But anyway, that's all I can say about this. It's not doing very well, but at least it's trying. We've got a new growth here, another one here, another one here. There's one tucked away in there, coming up the side there, and I think there was another one round here. Anyway, we have some new growths, and if you look down at the bottom of that new growth, you can see roots, and again here you can see roots. So I'm hoping, even though that's not many new growths, there will be enough roots pushed out to sustain the plant. That's the only thing I can hope for. And the plan for my winter resting type dendrobiums, which this is one, this year, is to extend their growing season using grow lights. So as the days get to their, shorten down to such an extent, I'll introduce the grow lights to extend their day lengths and keep their day lengths at around 12 hours well in towards winter, and possibly right into winter, as long as they're still growing. So that's the plan. Apart from that, it's not doing very well. It's not in a good state. There's no point in getting the pot out to look at the roots, because there aren't any. But hopefully there will be off of these new growths. So it's not a good plant at the moment. I'm trying to recover it, and with some new growths maybe it will become a good plant again, but not this year. Even if these new growths mature and push some roots down, it's still not a good plant. It's going to need another year's growing season with quite a few more growths than that to actually come back again. So that's all I can do this year, is just hope that it grows on and get some roots underneath it to help sort of feed itself and everything. Because at the moment, the only food it's getting really is photosynthesis type food. Okay, now under normal circumstances, a Dendrobium lindleyi grown in ideal conditions with the right light at the right part of the growing season and the resting season and everything else to go with it, during October should be starting to slow down. Possibly later in October, possibly even into November. But the slowdown is basically triggered by shorter days and temperatures starting to cool down a bit. That triggers the plant into saying, I'm about to go into my winter rest. So the growth starts to slow. Now on my plant, I've got new growth still pushing on. So I'm not going to let this plant rest, which is why it's going to go under the lights, and I'm going to use the lights to maintain my day lengths right into winter probably. And this is an example of one of the plants that is the reason I'm doing just that, to keep it growing. So we did actually get some more new growths pushed on. Not many, but some. There's some tucked away in underneath here as well. Some have actually pushed up a leaf, so they're hiding. They don't look like new growths anymore, but that's not much growth for a season, not much growth at all. We even had a new growth there that dropped its leaf, but actually produced some roots. So we do now have some roots going down into the pot. This plant is a collective. So if a bulb has got no leaf on it, but it has roots, the roots are still supplying energy to the unit, the plant unit. The roots are not just for the cane that they're underneath, they're for the whole plant. Yeah, so any roots on this plant are helping progress. So this has had a poor growing season. It had a very poor start in the year, and I'm going to try and keep it growing as best I can for the few new growths that there are. And then it's going to get a short winter rest in my conditions. Because of the late start and the disturbance of taking it off its mount, which basically lost most of its roots, it's only just surviving really. It's not a healthy, sturdy, happy plant. So I'm going to keep it growing into the winter. Then it's not really going to get a rest as such, because I'll be using the lights to start my dendrobiums early in the year. So this is only going to get a short period that you could actually call a rest this year. That's not natural. I mean, normally a winter resting dendrobium like this, you'd be looking at end of October, beginning of November, probably through to the end of February, beginning of March. Yeah, and as the days get longer, the plant will naturally come out of its rest. It's just that I don't get those normal conditions in this environment. So yeah, not a good year for this one, but it's survived. That's the important thing. I thought I was going to lose the whole plant. So we've managed to keep it. We've managed to get some roots growing, and I'm going to see if it does better in a pot. This will not be as easy to keep much drier in the winter in a pot full of moss, but the moss was there to encourage root growth, which seems to have worked in places. So once we get into the period of dryness for the winter, or almost dry, the amount of water that it gets will be absolutely minimal, and the bottom 2/3 of the pot will probably go completely dry, because there's no roots there anyway. There's no point in that being wet. So it'll just get a little spritz around the top. Not very often either. So this now, once I keep it growing, then once it actually gets to its resting period, really nothing much is going to change. It's under lights, it'll just get less water and no feed. for a relatively short period of time. So hopefully in this video, from the start to the finish, you should have all the information you need to grow Dendrobium lindleyi under normal conditions, and in amongst that information is what is not working well for me. And maybe that will relate to some of your problems if you have any. When this plant is growing well and it comes into bloom, it's an absolute stunner. It's well worth a bit of effort, in my opinion. Beautiful blooms, fragrant, well, mildly fragrant, you've got to get close. And if you've got the right conditions, grows quite easily. And providing you can give it that winter rest under normal circumstances, you'll induce those blooms and get a good blooming. So I think it's worth the effort. And as I've managed to save this one, we'll see what we can do with it next year. But my plan for next year is to get a lot more new growths and a decent root system. I'm not interested in blooms next year. If I get some, fine, but I doubt if I will. I'm only interested in growth and roots for next season. So there we go, Dendrobium lindleyi. Okay, so that was effectively video number 5 for this particular orchid, and yes, that is the end of my seasonal guide for this particular orchid. And that's how the final video for each of the individual project orchids will be. This is effectively the format. So, and collectively this video really joins together the whole of the project for the whole of the year. And I hope that's worked okay. Well, whether it has or hasn't, that's how it is. And I'll be doing the other same orchids on a Friday for the next 7 weeks until we've actually finished the project and got to the orchid number 8 and finished. Okay, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. The bit on the end. There's always a bit on the end. It suddenly dawned on me that by joining all the videos together, although they haven't been included in their entirety, they are edited versions of the original videos. If you can't be bothered with the whole playlist, you could just watch the last one, couldn't you? That's why this project this year has not really been the best. And I'm hoping to do something quite different next year that will be more useful and more viewer friendly. I hope, but I'm still thinking on that. I've got plenty of time. We've got till sort of end of January, February time. But yeah, this one has its flaws. I think it was better than the previous year probably, but it can be better. And ideas on a postcard. And see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for dropping by.